Is that the Swedish apple thing for the Halo top? Oh, God, I love that Halo top stuff. So glad I found that. But yeah, fellas, welcome back to the podcast. We're living in some interesting times at the moment.
First off, we got to start this podcast. Rest in peace, Rich Piana.
Yeah, we've been on Rich Piana rabbit hole this evening. It's a lot of fun, you know. We're going to do an 8-hour arm workout probably around like next month or so, where we're going to get protein shakes. Maybe, I guess, he said 16 shakes, so 16 each. And, well,
16 protein shakes.
We'll have a very long arm workout, you know, because as Rich Piana says, you got to be willing to do anything to get that extra inch on your arm.
You have to shock the muscle.
Exactly. And every once in a while, right, I've heard you have to confuse the muscle when it comes to working out. So I feel like that's the ultimate confusion for said muscle. Because you're not going to do that, like, every month or, well, probably more than 2 or 3 times in your life. So it's a real shocker to it.
You need to create new stimulus for adaptation.
Exactly. Doesn't the body get, like, too used to it?
It accommodates. It understands you're requiring it to do a certain thing. And it stops growing. Because it doesn't need to get any bigger to do that thing.
Yeah.
It's a fixed stimulus, therefore you have a fixed body.
So it becomes set in its ways, basically.
Yep.
Do you get that all from boxing? Like, do you start slowly not burning as many calories or
cardio? It's actually the opposite with cardio. The more efficient you get in something, the easier it is to burn more calories because you use more of yourself at once with less oxygen requirement.
Then eventually, like, the catabolic stuff, I guess, speeds up too, right?
Cardio is by nature catabolic. All cardio. Unless you're very well fed and there's so much nutrients that...
MK677.
MK677 could possibly help because it would fill your glycogen stores up higher. Also, cardarine could help. It keeps your glycogen stores higher. It's more selective towards fat. So it's less likely to put you in a catabolic state, but...
Those pills you told me to take that one time?
No. Cardarine's a research compound.
Oh, that's
I think
SARM,
I think that was yohimbine I told you to take.
But it was cartagine? L-carnitine. Right?
Oh, L-carnitine. No,
yeah,
L-carnitine and cardarine are very different things. L-carnitine is found in red meat. Cardarine is a research compound.
Not for human consumption, of course. And
not for human consumption.
if you get it in Minecraft, you know, it's just for research purposes, right?
Yeah.
It's nothing that you'd ever actually ingest because who knows what these chemicals do.
Yeah. In Minecraft, I've heard a lot of people taking these in Minecraft and having great outcomes with fat loss. And originally, when they're marketed as exercise in a pill in Minecraft, of course. And I don't know, the way that they got disapproved was really shady. It was because one study that was really poorly done said it caused cancer, and the dose was astronomically high.
It's kind of like the weed and the chimpanzee thing, right? Where they're like, it killed brain cells because they were smoking out the chimpanzees.
Yeah.
Which is so much that no one did.
Yeah, like no shit. If you give someone 10 times the regular dose of cardarine for a long time, they're going to be fucked up, man.
Yeah, I think we need to rethink, like, all of these surveys. Although, is cardarine technically considered like a SARM? No, right?
No, cardarine is I think it's called a PWR4 receptor agonist. It's something like that. It basically what cardarine does is it tells your body to use fat for energy. And what that does is it puts more glycogen inside your muscle. So your muscles get more full. You're basically almost doing keto while eating carbs. It lowers your insulin resistance. It's very good. It's very good for a lot of reasons. I think it has a lot of applications with diabetics.
So it's good, though, to lower your insulin sensitivity?
It's very good for that. I think if it would be interesting if we gave it to a bunch of diabetics to see if they cured them.
That's what I heard MK was being used for. Like with people who had trouble with weight loss.
MK has been used for diabetics?
I think people that were overweight specifically. I don't know about the diabetics part yet.
You do not want to give MK677 to a diabetic, to be honest.
Why not?
It makes it fucks up your insulin sensitivity. It makes you less insulin sensitive.
And that's a bad thing, right? That leads to diabetes?
That is the root of most old age diseases. some sort of insulin sensitivity issue. Because that could, it's a whole domino effect. Once that goes down, a lot of things can happen.
But then that could be avoided, like in Minecraft, right? You can avoid having all that occur if you were to spread out the dosage. Theoretically.
Of the MK?
Yeah. Like 3 days on, 3 days on, 4 days off.
You really want to moderate the dosage in Minecraft.
Yeah, nothing like super high,
Yeah.
right? Not hot rodding yourself with half the bottle in one go, or
it's like
basically
anything,
a milliliter.
From what I understand, it's like food be moderate.
Obviously, don't stay on that for too long in Minecraft because it's not, not the best compound in the world.
All compounds have a drawback.
Same thing with like creatine.
Right.
After a couple of years, that would damage your liver, from what I've heard. Although I'm not too
might.
sure how true that is.
I don't think so.
I know it's been the biggest scrutinized, I guess, training compound that you can take as a supplement.
Also, the most well respected. Creatine really is the one supplement that pretty much everyone gets behind.
Yeah, I remember back in the day I was told not to do it because, I would think that I would be able to lift a lot more than I actually can and blow out a bunch of muscles or something.
Who the fuck told you that?
Some folks that were not bodybuilders, per se. One fellow was like, yeah, I knew all these guys that were on creatine and then slipped a couple discs,
They were on fucking creatine, not creatine. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they were on creatine.
Yeah, on actual creatine. In quotation marks. Look, there's
pharmaceutical grade creatine.
There's always one guy in the back of a normal gym that's got the dirty needle and is like, hey kid, you want a bump?
Right.
That's the kind of creatine I imagine maybe 10, 20 years ago people were actually worried about.
Dude, 10, 20 years ago, they would sell supplements at stores that were just steroids. They would sell
Like
steroids at GNC. Like, there's this one crazy steroid called Superdrol, and it's the most toxic steroid you could fucking possibly take, but it also gets you yoked in like 4 weeks and strong as fuck. And people were just taking this shit, fucking themselves up, buying it at GNC.
Seriously?
Yeah, man.
I've gone into a GNC and a guy has tried to sell me like a triple the cost of what you normally pay for protein powder, and that's about it. Damn.
Yeah, GNC's really mellowed out over the years. It's almost sad. Like we kind of should have, like a racy store where it's like, oh my god, like I heard they're selling steroids, fucking Larry, he got big as fuck from GNC. Like there should be an interesting little store like that.
I mean, I'm sure some of the GNCs probably still do have a stash of a certain sauce compound in the background.
Probably.
But then again, like, do you really need to do that now that like the internet's around when it comes to getting these research chemicals?
No, you can get anything now.
Absolutely. But you're definitely the kind of guy telling people different kind of medical cocktails. You get the BPC, which I could personally attest to when I had used that to heal some tendon damage. It worked pretty well.
BPC 157, it's a derivative of growth hormone. It's only focused on healing. The fact that doctors don't prescribe this to injured people is ridiculous. It's truly ridiculous.
It's because it works.
It's because it actually fucking works.
I was, surprised when I had taken it. Like, oh, this says actually something decent that's going to help. I'd never really heard of peptide treatments prior to that.
If you get injured, you know what a doctor's going to tell you to take?
Like Advil or
pain pills.
Like ice and hot compress.
Ice might work.
I like what you said, Jake, about pain pills. Because I read a book about this. And this book was mentioning how our healthcare system is now so focused on pain and pain avoidance that it's ruining how we prescribe medication to people.
Yeah, I mean, it was, basically a decade ago, those pill mills were all over the country just churning out pain pills.
And got millions, well, not millions, but tens of thousands, maybe hundreds, addicted to opiates.
Who knows? It could be in the millions.
Could be.
And they knew what they
never
were
really
doing.
know.
Oh, they absolutely knew,
And I think, we read the same book. what was it called?
Dreamland.
Dreamland,
by Sam
yeah.
Cajones.
That was a
What's
pretty
that book about?
depressing book,
It's about
right?
the opioid epidemic in America.
It was talking about how, like, people from Jalisco, Mexico, right, had been making this kind of heroin that they were bringing up into these random towns that were popping up all over the place.
Yeah.
And the demand was really being created with all these pill mills coming around.
Right.
And when the government started cracking down on it, people, well, they lost out on their fix, and they were turning towards harder drugs. So in, like, tiny little rural towns in, like, Arkansas, which never had a drug problem or really had any, like, cartel or heroin dealer influence, overnight transformed into rapid decline.
Yeah, it was the Jalisco Boys and Purdue Pharma. Those were the two big agents that got our country addicted to opiates. And I blame Purdue Pharma more because the Jalisco Boys, on an individual level, these were just kids trying to make money. They didn't even realize what they were doing for the most part.
I don't think they had the like capability to realize how big of the scale was.
They weren't a violent drug syndicate. They are now.
Yeah.
But back then, they didn't kill anyone. They didn't have territory fights. They were very peaceful.
Like, not tell each other or tell, like, the other people that when they were going to do their, like, drug deliveries, like, who was going and all in case they would get in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't roll. So I don't think they were really capable of saying, like, oh, wow, we're going all over this country.
They were extremely hard for the
kind of drugs
authorities to nail down. But, on the other, completely legally, mind you, Purdue Pharma astroturfed. They bribed.
What's astroturfing?
Astroturfing is when you fake a grassroots movement. So let's say I am trying to sell you, well, this is what Purdue did. They made it seem like the community discovered their new drug. It was called OxyContin. And they made it seem like the community, it was a grassroots, built from the ground up from the community. It didn't come from the top down. It didn't originate. They didn't want you to think it originated in them. But it did.
And they were saying that Oxycontins are a good thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
They're saying that there's a grassroots movement in favor of Oxycontin.
Yep. And they downplayed its addictiveness. They bribed doctors and politicians. They would take them out on big, expensive dinners. They'd take them golfing. They did all sorts of crazy shit.
Dude, that's fucking
And you know what happened to Purdue Pharma?
What?
Slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
Jinx.
They got paid. I think it was like $100 million, $200 million fine, maybe more. Maybe it was around $1 billion at the most. But that is pocket change for a company of that size.
It's a drop in the bucket, basically.
Drop in the bucket. And ever since I read that book, I have not trusted a single thing to come from Big Pharma. And I never will.
I understand that skepticism, especially because, well, they went around, and as you had mentioned, it was all just like feeding upon human corruption, right? You feel obligated, I guess, after getting a payment or some gifts or an expensive dinner from this company, right? That you're willing to listen to what they say, and a lot of these pill mills started showing up around the country where prescriptions are being filled and created, and what the book really didn't get into was the actual, like, black market side of things. You guys ever hear the story of Paul LaRue?
No, who's that?
So Paul LaRue was this man born in what was then Rhodesia, now is Zimbabwe, and he immediately became obsessed with computers when he was growing up, and he became a very, very, I guess, prominent coder. He was very good at his job, and then magically just disappears. No one really knows what happens to him. Now, he starts setting up all these different companies, and he got into the pharmaceutical industry, where he said that, oh, everything's going to get revolutionized, right? And the man was pretty smart to figure all this stuff out. There were, like, massive levels of encryption, burying of companies so that nothing could be traced back to him. And in America and across, like, some other countries, he started contacting these, I guess, mom and pop shop pharmacies to try to get them, to join his little company. And what would happen is they would get thousands of orders a day for prescriptions, fill them, and then mail them out.
No shit.
So millions of dollars, probably more. I don't remember the exact number, but I really just went in depth in this from Evan Radcliffe's book, The Mastermind.
So people's identities were being stolen in a way?
No, these were actual orders. Because drug laws back then in the United States were a bit looser to where you could basically get a questionnaire sent to you right online. You fill it out saying that you have pain. It gets sent off to a doctor who's
you could just get Oxycontin online?
Yep, who was just clicking through it and checking everything off.
Holy fuck, man.
And a lot of these, like, telemedicine people back in the day, right, at these, well, pill mills, essentially, the doctors were just checking it off. They would get kickback for the more patients that they'd bring in.
Yeah.
And this is how things like organized crime was able to get involved with this booming, like, opioid epidemic in the United States.
That's insane, man. And you could never go to a doctor and him look at you and he's like, oh, like, you're fucked up. Like, your insulin sensitivity is really bad. Here's some Cardarine. But they'll give you opiates, which just ruin lives.
Oh, yeah. I have never gotten, like, a prescription for that from a doctor, but I know people that have. And it's...
Opiates?
Yeah, opiates. I've never had an injury or, like, a medical procedure serious enough to have warranted that.
Did you get your wisdom teeth out?
Yes.
Yeah.
They were giving me Tylenol as a painkiller.
That sucks.
I don't know what was given to me in the room. Probably like some sort of anesthetic that I have no idea what it was. But I already had medicine in my house and I didn't get anything from that. But I know people that have where they've taken maybe one or two, right, like a dose as the doctor said, and they just felt blissful, and it was almost like they began to miss it. As I've been told, right?
Yeah.
One individual that I knew that had pretty bad surgery, thank God, recovered from it, got out of it, started taking these pills and to help manage the pain when they were recovering, but eventually they started feeling almost depressed or sad during their days when they weren't taking it.
Wow.
And it wasn't flaring up. And this is maybe 2 or 3 years ago, after the whole reformulation of these medicines and the laws against it.
Yeah.
Even then, it's still
Damn,
it's still going on addictive. He flushed them. He's like, I'm not dealing with this anymore. This is not happening.
Yeah.
I'm not going with this stuff anymore.
It's deep, man. We're fucking with some crazy shit.
Absolutely.
This kind of shit they can bring out of country, man.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. When the country is hooked to a very addictive chemical, it's pretty difficult to unhook them, I would say. And I think largely a grassroots reaction, like a legitimate one, not an astroturf one, against like these companies, against these practices is pretty legitimate. And I think that's how a lot of these communities were able to clean themselves up.
We're hooked on a lot of chemicals, though. We're hooked on sugar. We're hooked on
Caffeine, nicotine.
How about
any like seed oils?
Seed oils, that's what I was thinking. Dude, seed oils are in everything. If you go through a supermarket, besides for the produce and the meat, there's a seed oil in everything else.
Which doesn't make much sense. Like, how would it be in something as inconsequential as, let's say, raw cacao, for example?
They must be really cheap. Really cheap. Like,
I guess it's a thinning agent too, maybe?
Canola oil, almost the opposite. I think it gives things like a palatable texture.
No, I mean in the sense like when it's like coming to the manufacturing wise, they could use less of other ingredients if they cut it with something like a palm oil.
Yeah. And canola oil is the OG seed oil. It was invented in the early 1900s, and it was invented to lube up machines.
So why are we eating it?
To grease machines. We're eating it because it's cheap as fuck, and people realized that if you deodorized it, because it naturally smells completely rancid, if you deodorize it and filter it a bunch of times, you get this weird concoction of vaguely edible seed oil.
I like how you stress the vaguely part.
Very vaguely. When would a hunter-gatherer find 500 calories of plant fat? Plant fat?
How would he even find that?
How would he even find fucking plant fat besides nuts? And seed oils have a very different chemical composition than the fats found in nuts. Like a soybean oil is much more obscure to your body than something like a walnut.
Which one would be worse though? Because I know you're anti-nut. Like
I'm anti-nut.
Regardless of which one it is,
Yeah.
what would be worse for you than the seed oil or like let's say a jar of almond butter or something?
I would say seed oils are the most dangerous thing that there are.
And what does that cause?
Well, first of all, it causes obesity. And the reason it causes obesity is because there's no chemical signals that come along with the fat that allow your body to know that an influx of calories is coming in. And that does two things. It prevents you from being satiated the way something like a steak would. There's a lot of chemical signals in a steak that tell your body, hey, we're eating a lot of calories right now. Chill with the hunger. If you eat salad dressing, there's less of that.
Oh boy, yeah.
There's
You
no
always want
chemical
more.
signals that you're eating a lot. So it makes you fat for that reason. It doesn't satiate hunger. And then also, seed oils are very volatile. If you put a seed oil on the counter, it's liquid. If you put it in a pan, it'll sizzle, go into vapor. If you put it in the fridge, it'll harden. It's very volatile. Butter is if you put butter on the counter, it remains solid. Put it in the pan, it remains solid for a while. In the fridge, it's solid. It's very stable. And naturally, the kind of fats that are found in butter, which are saturated, are about 97% of our body. Polyunsaturated, which are seed oil fats, are usually about 2-3% of our body. So, what we have going on is we're eating all these unsaturated fats, and the chemical composition of the human bodies went from 2% polyunsaturated to 30%.
Wow.
Which is huge, man. Like, we don't even fully understand the implications of what that means. We really don't know what the full ramifications of that could mean. But I think we can know by looking at what that's correlated with. As polyunsaturated fats have risen, obesity's risen, heart disease has risen. We've gotten more food, and we're less healthy.
And that's more medicine for Big Pharma to sell to us.
Fuck yeah, it is, man.
It's all a system, and that's why we're getting fucked right now. Our food and our drugs.
Yeah.
We need a good Teddy Roosevelt and his pure food and drugs movement in the 90s, not the 90s, in the early 1900s. We need like a revival of that because we need a politician, we need someone with power that can take a stand. Because I know for a fact that what those people were eating in the 1900s, yeah, it was bad, it was unclean, but it was natural.
It was nutrient dense.
It was nutrient dense. Now we're eating sugar and seed oils and fat and everything. Even sugar's in so much of our food, man. You can get store-bought tomato sauce, right?
Yeah.
Sure, it'll have some sugar in it from the tomatoes, right? If you make it your own homemade sauce. But there's like 100 grams of sugar in a can of tomato sauce at home.
Why? There's just no reason. Like
Because
it's just
we're
tomato
so
sauce.
addicted to it.
We're hooked, man.
We're hooked. Sugar is a very addictive chemical. And, what's interesting about sugar is that we really didn't eat it until colonial times.
Besides in fructose.
What?
Besides in fructose.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't add sugar to our food. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Until colonial times. So, teeth. You know how sugar's bad for your teeth?
Yeah.
Medieval times, people actually had pretty good teeth. Because they didn't eat sugar, like, at all. Except
Wow.
from fruit
Really?
or honey. But then, around the time, 1500s and onward, they come along. The elite, they had a ton of sugar in their food. Their teeth were rotten. It's a little known fact, but George Washington, his teeth were completely rotten. He had to wear wooden dentures.
Holy fuck.
Yeah.
And then we can directly trace that towards that dietary choice.
Yeah.
He wore
Wow.
wooden dentures
He had wooden dentures.
as president?
I don't know if he
Or
had them when he
afterwards?
was president. I'm not exactly sure of the timeline on this. I don't know that covered this. But yeah, and it wasn't just Washington, of course. I think it was pretty bad in the French decadent elite too.
Oh, absolutely. If you don't get me wrong, every once in a while I do enjoy French food, but if you look at like your typical bakery spread, it's all like high saturated fat stuff like croissants or croissant with chocolate.
Saturated
or-
fats are more natural than unsaturated fats. Honestly, they're probably using some sort of oil that's unsaturated.
Yeah.
Which your doctor will tell you is good for you because it's not going to raise your cholesterol. But cholesterol is a building block for testosterone and most hormones in your body.
You kind of need it.
You need it. And also, if you're really healthy, you're less likely to deposit that cholesterol in your arterial walls. They've done studies on people who do animal-based diets, and some of them will have sky-high cholesterol, like through the roof. Unbelievable high cholesterol. To the point where the doctor's like, you are on the way for heart disease. But then they'll do a scan, an internal scan of if any cholesterol has been deposited, and they have record low blockage. Like, so much so that it doesn't even register on the test they're doing.
So
it just comes up as 0.
An animal-based diet is good if you're active, then, right?
Yes. Yeah. I would say if you were to put a diabetic on an animal-based diet, which is simple sugars and a lot of saturated fat, it would probably fuck them up, and a lot of salt. Like, that'd probably not be good for someone who's already too far gone. You probably gotta bring them back in a different way. But for someone who's already healthy, I think it's the most optimal diet.
Speaking of diabetes, if we didn't have sugar in like medieval times, well, was diabetes a thing back then?
No, dude. Well, at least type 2.
Yeah.
Type 1, the kid would probably die.
Yeah. Kid would die, you'd die as a baby. But type 2, that's when you're fat, right? Or type 2 diabetes. Yeah.
Type 2 is like self-induced.
I feel like, what's the obesity percentage in America now? It's 70%?
70%?
Yeah. Is it actually?
I think it's...
Let's look this up.
It's,
How did we get that far gone? Like,
our food?
I remember back in the day, my parents always telling me, like, oh, sometimes during the day, you're going to feel hungry, but drink water instead. Because your body is tricking your brain into thinking that you're hungry, especially after you've craved something. And I never really understood that until I realized, wait a second, as you said before, Jake, these oils don't satisfy you, right?
Yes.
Like, I could go through an entire thing of McDonald's, right?
Or, dude, chips.
Or chips as well.
Seed oils on some... What even is a chip? It's like corn.
Just
like
fried
weirdly
corn.
minced with all these chemicals.
Or potatoes.
Fried to perfection and just tastes amazing.
I can get through all of that and eat through an entire bag, an entire meal, whatever. And then maybe 20 minutes later be like, all right, we're eating again.
Yes.
And that is why I think a lot of people in this country are fat.
True.
And they're fat because they're too lazy to cook themselves, or they can't cook themselves. Fresh ingredients are not cheap, so it's not entirely their fault.
But I'll say this. We should love the fat people. Because without the fat people, there is no fit people. You are not fit unless someone is fat. Everything's relative.
That's true.
Therefore, the more fat people there are, the more excellent we look.
Speaking of relative, I saw a photo of the world's fattest man from like the 1890s. He's in a circus. They show him off because they're freaks, quote unquote. And this man just looks like your average American today.
No shit.
Yeah.
Speaking of your average American, according to Harvard University, roughly 2 out of 3 adults in the U.S. are overweight or obese, and that's 69%. And 1 out of 3 people are obese at 36%.
69's intense, man.
Yeah, so it's not 70, but it's almost there.
I was talking about the sex position.
Oh.
Well, that's also intense.
It's really the most intense position in sex. When you think about it. It's the most commitment, It's the most intimate in a very unusual way. It's the most intense position. Anyone who says any otherwise is ridiculous.
Yeah, because once you're there, you just gotta commit.
You're there. You better perform. You're invested.
It's kind of like buying a Tesla stock.
No. I don't know about that, man.
Or,
it's kind of like starting a company. 69 position's a lot like starting a company.
How so?
There's no getting out of it.
That's right. You get, like, investors, you gotta stick with it.
Yeah.
Because you have a responsibility to your shareholders.
Fucking right, man. fucking right.
I mean, in this
How
case,
did we
it's
get
one
this
other
topic
show.
from obesity? Oh, 69%.
69%. Thank you, Harvard, for diverting us.
Harvard, you perverts.
But speaking of circuses, as Steve had just mentioned, you guys want to talk about what's going on in this country right now? In terms of
What
ecological
the fuck is
nightmares?
going on?
Well, I did not get the chance to prepare a list of all crazy shit that's been happening, but every day, at least 2, there's been some train being derailed or an explosion in a metal alloy factory. Those have been pretty recent.
I really feel like any list we try to put together right now is just going to constantly expand and be outdated.
There's the big one, East Palestine. Today there was another a fire at a uranium enrichment facility or something. That's not good.
Things like farms being impacted from fires
the egg
to
farms last month.
To like avian bird flu or something being present in some birds. That's a major issue that is going on right now.
It feels almost like there's a coordinated effort against our infrastructure.
What is happening?
I heard Tucker Carlson mention, like, it is not normal that thousands of ecological events or train derailments happen, and that a lot of things, well, there are crazy people out there. I don't know if that's true. I don't think anyone really knows, but it's a very strange time that we can't really say is 1,000% a coincidence every single occasion.
Yeah.
You guys know what I mean? I'm not trying
There
to
are no coincidences.
I'm not trying to get conspiratorial, but I just think it's really weird that all of these things are just happening at once.
If it happens twice, unusual, might not be a coincidence. If it happens 3 times, probably a coincidence. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, not a coincidence. It's just happening.
I really feel like these ecological issues started from Nord Stream 2.
Yeah.
Jake and I were talking about this morning as to who made Nord Stream 2 disappear. You know, the gas pipeline in the Baltic Sea a couple months ago. And
What are you talking about?
The Nord Stream pipeline?
Yeah, the gas pipeline that ran under the Baltic Sea from Russia to Germany.
What happened?
And then magically it exploded. Remember we were talking about that earlier?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, a pipeline blew up and no one really knows what happened to it underneath the sea. Some people think it was us. Some people think it was Russia. Some people think it was Poland or Germany. I really think that was like a time where there was a major ecological disaster.
It was
but
probably CIA.
These little things are popping up.
Yeah. It's very strange. I mean, honestly, the CIA, I wouldn't put anything past them. They could be doing all of this for some reason. They've went rogue a few times in history, and they've done some crazy ass shit. Probably killed a president and sent us to Vietnam.
What are your guys' theories when it comes to these train derailments and fires and chemical spills?
Well, I don't know who it is. If it is the government, what reason would there be? Because if it is the government, start paying attention to see if they start... Because they're not really talking about this. If they start talking about this, and if they start blaming someone...
Mayor Pete only recently just started talking about East Palestine.
Yeah. If they start blaming someone, then we know that it's probably the government. Because, like, let's say they blame Russia.
This would be such an easy way to win some political points. If you just get on TV as a congressperson and you're like, hey, just talk about East Palestine. Just talk about it.
That's what Trump is doing
That'd
right
be
now.
Easy points.
Trump is in East Palestine right now, buying food for everyone,
Oh,
covering from his own bill. It's extremely good PR.
Yeah.
Well, meanwhile, Biden is falling up the plane stairs of Air Force One in Ukraine and now Poland.
Biden's got dementia. Take it easy on him.
I heard today that like Pete Buttigieg is just now getting to go to this place in Ohio, and I'm pretty sure he's like some higher up in like the Environmental Protection Agency in this country, and has to do with like transportation of these kinds of things.
Well, they're saying the drinking water is completely safe.
Completely safe. Yet I've seen multiple videos of just dead fish everywhere, crows falling out of the sky, and even places as far away as like Lexington, Kentucky, for example.
300. That's 350 miles away from East Palestine, mind you.
And
holy fuck.
Even parts of Canada, right? They were in that yellow zone on a map showing where possible contamination is. all along the western part of New York and northern Pennsylvania area.
So us?
So it was like Buffalo area had some issues with water going up towards Canada that direction. So I don't know why a lot of these environmental types are not talking about it. You would think that this is a major rallying cry, that these sort of regulations probably shouldn't have been overlooked. I definitely think that there needs to be at least some sort of investigation to the practices of companies and transportation of these pretty hazardous materials.
Well, the problem is, first of all, this was bad already when the train derailed in East Palestine. I think 38 cars carrying vinyl chloride. The vinyl chloride didn't get out, though. Well, it did get out. But vinyl chloride itself... Okay, I don't know exactly what I'm talking about, so ignore that last part. But the governor of Ohio, his name's Mike something, he ordered a controlled burn. He thought it would be a good idea if they set the vinyl chloride on fire. And I just wrote an article on this for the Lamron at Geneseo. And that splits it into two other chemicals. I forgot what they're called. But that's where our problems are. He ordered this to be burned, and that's why there's that giant mushroom cloud out of East Palestine. That's why there's the giant black cloud from orbit. This was intentional. He ordered this to happen.
Oh my god, that's a major fuck up.
Yeah. You know, we can shit on of course I shit on the Soviet Union. And they did a horrible job handling Chernobyl, but at least they tried to handle it.
Yeah.
You know, the moment it happened.
Honestly, though, I agree with that sentiment, but I really feel like, well, if I was in charge and didn't know quite everything about it, I might probably say the same thing. So it's a fucking massive f up in this regard.
It's just a classic blue collar guy thing to say.
Yeah,
like you would find that answer at a bar. If you just went to a bar in East Palestine and you asked them what to do, the same thing would happen.
But I feel like that is definitely some serious human error in decision making there.
And there shouldn't be.
There shouldn't be. There should have been protocols or at least something to know how to deal with it. And
there should be a guy who knows about this chemical consulted.
But I've also heard rumors that they kind of lied about the manifest of the train, what was specifically on it.
Yep.
I don't know how true
this
that
happened
is.
on February 3rd, and we didn't know until it went viral on Twitter about a week later.
And apparently the government is only doing things now.
Media silence. I think there's a journalist arrested.
Yeah, that was the weird part there. A journalist was taken into custody for reporting on something, which is pretty unnerving.
Soviet
for reporting on East Palestine?
Right
yeah.
What the fuck, dude?
It's very strange.
You know, in Chernobyl, they tried to cover it up. And
they did the same thing.
Yeah, they did the same thing. They tried to cover it up. Eventually, their enemies, the United States, starting to figure out that, hey, there's a massive radiation spike in Ukraine, or what is now Ukraine. And they kept denying, and maybe we're in that phase right now, where we know what's going on, or we don't know what's going on, but we know something's going on.
Yeah.
And the government is downplaying it. They're saying, "Oh, the water's safe. You can drink the water." I think the mayor and some other official were seen on video drinking the tap water, but it's probably fake.
Yeah.
There's no way.
It could very well just be bottled water.
I've seen a video I posted on my Instagram story of tap water in East Palestine. It was brown.
What the fuck?
Yeah. And people were saying the water smells like
that's not
chemicals.
safe then.
Of course it's not safe. If you trust the government telling you that water is safe, then you're a fucking idiot.
There are parts of the United States that take their water from ground wells, and you can't drink the water in many areas because of that.
Yeah.
Because of potential chemical seepages of runoff, of fracking, and things like that. Now, that is pretty major. So if you're telling me it's not safe to drink groundwater, which is below said ground, yet I can drink water with plenty of chemicals in it, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to believe that for an absolute second. And it doesn't look like there's much progress in terms of a cleanup. I've heard that the
Stuff
company.
started happening today.
Yeah, the company is in charge of cleaning it up, but
They covered.
who knows?
The company's Norfolk Southern paid for a report that said the chemicals were bad and there's no chemicals in the water. And the mayor referenced that report, not the mayor, the governor referenced that report when he said that it was fine. And experts from outside the government have scrutinized this report, and they say it's full of shit and it's not valid. Are you surprised?
No, not at all.
Not at all. It's all bought off. Pharma's bought off. The military-industrial complex buys off politicians for war votes.
Yep.
Transportation industry.
Everyone's bought off in America. It functions as an oligarchy.
Yeah, we aren't in a capitalist society anymore. We aren't in a democracy anymore.
Were we ever?
In a capitalist society?
Yeah.
Well,
in the
no.
50s,
Let's say
in the
oligarchy
60s.
versus something like a constitutional republic democracy.
There was a shift.
Well, it depends on who you ask, but
I'd say the FDR reforms were a
say,
major issue
yeah.
that switched it towards an oligarchy.
Yeah.
Because it really benefited not the average person. That was World War II that really jump-started the economy for most people.
Yep.
It benefited him and his boys in the Upper West Side of New York City.
How so?
How so? Is, well, essentially, right, he brought in all these people to structure things like bailouts and government money, right, to all these companies that had failed when the markets had collapsed. And while the Roosevelts continued to live high and all their friends continued to live high and got all these military contracts, they were given all these different opportunities to restart the economy through public works projects, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, the average person's life really didn't change all that much.
Social Security was good, though.
Social Security was a decent idea, but that wasn't really his idea. I personally think Social Security was going to be an inevitable thing anyway.
But he got it done, man. There's something to that.
Yeah.
You gotta give him credit for that.
It would have happened regardless whether or not he was in there. Because America back in the day looked towards like the Prussian model with like Bismarck. Bismarck having universal health care.
You don't know it would have happened, though, man. He got it done. He got it done.
If we're looking at the historical view of history of institutions, right? Historical institutionalism being a subset of political science. Essentially, right, there are certain catalysts as well as outside influences that come together that make certain things likely within its trajectory. And Social Security within the Anglosphere was pretty popular. And it was popular around the turn of the 18th and 19th century.
Yeah.
Wait, no. 1800s and 1900s, because the British wanted to outcompete the Prussians and the Germans because of Otto von Bismarck, with their little rivalry and all of that. So that's how national health care, social safety nets, and stuff like that came to these countries. The U.S. being a part of that Anglosphere, while did not go as far as Canada and the U.K., was on the track of following that ideas. Because we are part of the Anglo-War.
I'm saying, okay, public option was a popular idea during Obama. It had traction, and it would have fit the way the world was going, but he was a pussy and didn't get it done. FDR, at least, you gotta have some balls to get things done.
I've gained a lot of... I have grown a lot more critical of FDR recently.
Yeah.
And that's because he was buddy-buddy with Joseph Stalin. And he gave Stalin half of Europe after World War II.
Yeah.
Which he should not have done. Because Russia was our ally in World War II. Out of necessity.
Yeah.
We didn't need them the way they needed us.
The Lend-Lease program kept Russia alive.
Yeah. And imagine if things turned out differently, what would happen? Maybe no Cold War. Millions of Russians died under Stalin. Millions. He's one of the worst men in history to have ever lived. And our president was snuggling up to him. Well, he wasn't snuggling up to him, but... yeah, he was snuggling up to him.
Yeah,
and,
he was.
So my grandmother, God rest her soul, loved FDR because she grew up during the Depression, and he is attributed with ending the Depression. John, you argue any president could have done that because World War II happened. Anyways.
I 1000% think that the end of the Depression and the jump start of the economy came largely out of the necessity of protecting freedom and democracy across this entire planet. I know I'm going to get flack for saying the term freedom and democracy, but legitimately that's what we were doing.
My grandmother, she loved him. He was her favorite president, and I respect her wishes, you know. But at the same time, I feel like I've matured a lot when I've realized that FDR is not a saint.
He's not a perfect man, but I mean, he was dealing with a lot of variables. Like, what president would have handled Hitler, Stalin, all these people perfectly? Like, what man would have been able to do that?
He was he was quite a man.
He had to balance a lot of shit.
And he had polio.
And he had polio.
And he hid that from the entire country.
Yeah, because he
didn't want to look weak. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. You know, there's no doubt that FDR was, in many ways, a remarkable man. A very interesting person. But
at the same time, we can still critique his authoritarian and corrupt tendencies.
Yeah, I think his friendliness with Russia was a massive mistake, and his decisions there shaped the entire world today.
I think his hand was also largely forced because a couple decades earlier we had a very, very good president named Woodrow Wilson.
Oh, yeah.
One of the greats, right? And I think that Woodrow Wilson basically allowing the Soviets to come to the table eventually, or not Wilson specifically, but the policies he laid forward shaped a lot of problems. It definitely gave some sort of credence towards authoritarianism and totalitarian regimes, and that the West was willing to play ball, which from day one it probably shouldn't have. And I think that some elements of his ideas, right, largely were wrong in the fact that we continued to cozy up with the Soviets because we preached all these things about.
We're Monday morning quarterbacking though, because
yeah, of course
we're looking back and we're like, oh, the Soviets were so bad, but what if we supported Hitler and then Hitler killed?
That would have been equally bad. But the Roosevelt style, right, of cozying up with these authoritarian regimes.
Didn't he have to though to win that war? Like, did it? Like, what other options did he have than to form a good relationship with Stalin?
Well,
who was throwing his own bodies at our war?
When we joined, I think the conflict became very much so one-sided. That's the inner American in me. We handled most of the Pacific by ourselves. And when we were saying freedom and democracy, right, we wanted people to be free. And then we were willing to hand over Eastern Europe, and then we just allowed that to continue to happen in Eastern Europe with pretty horrific things that occurred in these countries as forced communist takeovers took over. It's pretty sad.
Well, you know, of course, it's infamous what the Russians did to the German women when they invaded. Right, they committed atrocities.
Not even just people. Them, the Polish, the Belarusian, everyone in the Baltic states was subjected to brutal repressions, and it was even to the point where people in the Baltic countries went into the woods and became something called the Forest Brothers, where they until the 1960s and 70s they were just hiding in the woods, just committing sabotage on the Soviets.
Based.
Forest Brothers.
The Forest Brothers, yes. They were in Poland for a while, but the Polish government, under Stalin's orders, said that they would give an amnesty deal to any anti-communist resistance fighter that came out of the woodwork. People came out.
I guess that's where the saying "coming out of the woodwork" comes from. Like, they're literally coming out of the fucking woodwork.
They're in the trees.
Where the trees speak Polish, I guess.
The trees are speaking Polish.
I don't trust Polish trees, not for one second.
Neither do I. Neither do I.
I'm fucking Polish. I don't trust the trees, though.
Honestly, like, if you leave the cities of the country and go into the countryside of Poland, you don't see any trees whatsoever.
Really?
Yeah.
Why, they cut them all down?
It's just farmland.
Yeah, it's farmland.
Like, there are some forests that I passed by in the train, but it's just wheat field after wheat field after wheat field, corn and stuff like that. All that was being grown there.
Good for Poland.
Yeah, it was very beautiful. I recommend. They've definitely recovered from the authoritarian spell that they were
You
under.
were in the farmy part of Poland, though, right? You were in, like, southern Poland.
I went from the north to the south, so I went from Gdańsk, right, which is a northern port city, to the capital, to the south, and going through it from the train perspective was pretty cool. My first train trip down was on the Soviet train that goes about 30 miles an hour, so that was pure torture with 12 other people in the cabin with me.
Damn,
and
brother.
no air conditioning, going through farm country.
That's the kind of shit that'll make you want to be a tree brother.
Yeah, exactly. But then going from the capital to the south, we took one of them high-speed Euro rail or whatever they're called trains. That was pretty nice and, luxurious.
Yeah. Feeling like a businessman?
Yeah, it took 2.5 hours at air conditioning. They brought me, like, alcohol. So it was a great train trip. It was free, too. It was the funniest thing in the world. All the drinks and food, because it was included in our ticket, which... I did the math when I was done. Came out to like $12 US.
For food and a train.
For food, drink, and train trip.
No shit.
Wasn't even in first class. I was wondering what first class would look like.
Oh, dude, I bet they got strippers.
Probably.
Polish strippers? That sounds like fun.
They'd probably be Albanian, though.
That sounds good. American strippers?
It was like...
That just sounds trashy.
I don't know.
Albanian
I walked past,
strippers?
a certain establishment in Warsaw down a side street, and there was a giant Albanian flag, and it looked pretty seedy. It was a lounge of sorts, let's say.
Where do we find Albanian wives?
Albania.
Yeah, Albania. You can go there. You can find in the mountains your trad Catholic waifu or your trad Islamic waifu, I guess. If you want to go that direction.
You can find a good wife.
My Islamic grandfather found himself a trad Catholic waifu.
Nice.
Yeah. Her parents weren't
Bro, I think you should explain
about
what that means. People don't understand what that term means.
Trad?
Yeah.
Traditional. Stay at home. Cook for you. Raise your children.
Old school.
That's what my friend did. He went to Albania, disappeared for 3 months, comes back to the States, and somehow has a wife.
Based.
Unironically, extremely based.
Yeah. The concept of a trad wife in America isn't really a thing anymore because women are mostly in the workforce.
It's too expensive.
A stay-at-home... Yeah, it's literally too expensive to be a stay-at-home wife.
Yeah.
In America. And that's genuinely sad because...
That's fucked up.
I do believe women should have the right to work if they want to. But we're kind of going the other way when we're demonizing women staying at home, saying, "Oh, then you're giving up all your power, you're giving up all your agency in society."
Right.
When, I mean, look at the benefits of a stay-at-home household, and your traditional romanticized 1950s American household, that these were the parents of the boomer generation, and they famously grew up with everything
they fucked that up.
Well, even then,
with plenty.
We can go to a basic economic view of that, of how bad the economy, I guess, since the 60s and 70s really has gotten to where even a high-paying salary is not enough to raise a family in the modern world. I don't know if that's a result of inflation or natural increases of price over time. I don't know, or the value of the dollar going down, but that is a stark reflection of an economy when, for example, let's say, we'll just use my grandfather as an example. My grandmother never worked, but after my grandfather returned home from World War II as an officer, he got a job with, I believe, the Veterans Affairs, or maybe the Veterans Bureau, if that's what it was called back in the day. And his role was to help soldiers that were transitioning out of the military into civilian jobs and help them find stable careers. Now, that doesn't sound like a high-paying job, and in truth today, it's probably not. But my mother, my uncle, and my grandmother lived comfortably at home. It wasn't really necessary for them to work, and my grandmother only worked during World War II because she had to. So, if that's a reflection of our economy, I think we would need some serious changes to where like I said, even a high-paying job or something as a low-paying job used to be a standard that was able to provide for everybody what your needs. Yeah. But now you have parents that are gone almost completely from their houses and kids that grow up without their parents, which is also not good.
That also impacts food because a stay-at-home mom does the cooking, and
if
home
she's
cooked
working
meals
all the time,
are healthier.
You know,
yeah,
you can't do that.
Home cooked meals are healthier. The family, everyone knows how important the family dinner is. Having a dinner around a table with the family. No one is having family dinners anymore. Not even my household. We just don't do it. We just eat, grab what you want, eat in the living room, watch TV.
It's something we try to do.
Up,
I mean, we try to do a family meal every once in a while, but it makes me sad how we don't do that at my house anymore. But family meals are very important, very good bonding times, social
There's
times.
less unity nowadays.
There's less unity in families. There's less of a feeling of a unit. Divorce rates are at an all-time high in America.
I think it's because a lot of the policies of the last 20, 30 years, when it comes to, like, I guess both parties as well are equally guilty of this. It put fiscal policy first over everything else. So everything became for profit. Everything became based upon consumption.
Yep.
Right? Like, I've always heard, like, oh, what are the Democrats actually progressing? Or what are the Republicans actually conserving? And that was something that I heard growing up, literally in that era where, oh, it's all about the taxes, right? That's all we heard about for 20 years.
Yeah.
Basically. That is no real way to run a country when you're focusing too heavily on the economy. And a lot of things in the social area also got consumed by economic activity. Yep. Right. Like, oh, keep Christ in Christmas, commercialization of those kinds of holidays. And I think that drove a wedge in a lot of people.
And work is following you everywhere now because now we can do emails. Companies are expecting more effort on our end when we're not in the actual office. There's some businesses, but there's a video game developer I love. They're called Supergiant Games. And they're an independent company. It's only like 30 people. I have a poster for their game in my room. But they have a rule. And no emails outside of work. You can't. You cannot talk about work. You go home. You do whatever the fuck you want. Work is during work time. They don't expect you to have this ultra commitment and slave away at your job. And I feel like more companies should adapt to that. What?
Probably keeps them fresh.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that's the way that businesses work now. That's literally impossible for most companies and corporations.
Yeah.
But I feel like we should all make a step to separate work from our free time. We need more free time in general.
Absolutely.
Hours are long. There's this, I don't know a lot about
Everyone's
it, but
fat.
Everyone's fat. We don't have time. A lot of people don't have time to work out because they're too busy with work.
Yeah.
I honestly think this is a side effect of the economic globalization attempts that were stemming from the late 80s reforms to basically in the 90s with the Bushes and the Clintons and Obama as well, right? Where profit seemed to be placed over people in quite a few areas, and it was all about the free exchange of goods and all of that.
Yeah.
But we're seeing a world now where globalization has really showed itself to not be very efficient, and it really shows itself how it is fragile, especially with the whole pandemic that had occurred a couple of years ago, right, where the economy basically stood still. We realized that the global supply chain in and of itself is a very fragile environment to work in. And I think that we might actually be seeing a return to higher paying jobs, maybe less work time and all of that in the near future. If someone like Peter Zeihan is right, who we've talked about pretty extensively with each other, and his book is the end of globalization, or the end of the world is not the end, or something like that. It's the beginning. I forget the exact name, where he posits that the world transformed through globalization, but is about to do a major revert outside of that, back to how things really used to be in terms of money and society, as well as how states operate. And he seems almost optimistic about the future when it comes to things like the United States economy. Yeah. I don't think this is going to last forever. I think
he's
it'll
the
be okay.
geographist, right?
Geopolitical analysis.
Geopolitical analysis. Analyst.
Analyst. There we go.
Analyst.
Yeah, it's getting late. I'm exhausted, but gotta say, guys, we covered a lot of ground on this podcast.
Oh man, dude,
this was our best.
Didn't we
podcast.
start this podcast with Rich Piana?
We started with Rich Piana talking about getting steroids going, and that was pretty late
And
at
then we
night.
ended with the future of the American government.
Exactly, and
We
I've
had a
enjoyed
very
this
good
conversation.
podcast, yeah.
That was deep, man.
It is.
It's
Yeah.
fucking deep.
We like having these deep conversations, these stories. If you guys want to say your little parts that you always do at the end of these podcasts, by all means.
Inshallah,
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Of
my
course.
enemy will be defeated, and I will taste his blood.
That's new.
Yep.
All right.
like that.
Well, thanks, guys. It's been cool.
Peace.